Today we're diving into a story that was nearly erased from history, a brutal, almost forgotten chapter of the American Civil War that was buried for more than a century.
So, let's set the scene. It's February 14th, 1864, Valentine's Day. The war is raging, and along the Mississippi River, in a really remote part of Arkansas, something truly terrible is about to happen.
And this quote, man, it just says it all, doesn't it? It perfectly captures the tragic irony here. This was supposed to be a routine mission for supplies, but it turned into an absolute bloodbath.
Okay, so to really get what went down, you have to understand the kind of war being fought in this region. This wasn't some conventional conflict with rules of engagement and prisoner exchanges. No, this was something far, far more vicious. This was the terrifying reality for a lot of Union soldiers, but especially for formerly enslaved men. They were facing what's known as Black Flag warfare. What does that mean? Well, it meant that if you were captured, you weren't going to a prison camp. You were going to be killed on the spot. It was a war of extermination, plain and simple.
So you have to realize, for these men, putting on that Union blue uniform, that was an incredible act of courage. Thanks to the Emancipation Proclamation, it was a chance to literally fight for their own freedom. But they absolutely knew that for their Confederate enemies, that uniform didn't mean prisoner of war. It meant target.
All right, let's bring it back to the men at the heart of this story and what they were doing on that fateful day.
We're talking about Company G of the 1st Mississippi Infantry, and these guys were freedmen, former slaves, now soldiers in the Union Army. They just stepped off a steamer at a place called Ross's Landing on a totally routine assignment, grabbed some corn and other supplies for the regiment's horses, a simple, necessary job.
But here's the thing, while they were doing this totally routine job, they were being watched. An enemy was hiding, just waiting for the right moment to strike.
So who was hiding? Tucked away in the dense canebrake, that's the super tall, thick reeds that grow by the river, was a unit of Confederate guerrillas. These weren't regular Army guys. They were described as half-bushwhackers, part of the 9th Missouri Cavalry, and they had a reputation for being absolutely ruthless.
Okay, and this is where you see the absolute tactical nightmare Company G was walking into. It was a total mismatch. The Union soldiers had single-shot, muzzle-loading rifles. They could fire once, but then it took them a good 20 seconds to reload. The attackers? They were carrying 6-shot revolvers. They could just keep firing. It was a devastating disadvantage.
And it all went down so fast. A Union sentry, he sees something, fires off a warning shot. Company G, to their credit, they're disciplined. They form a line, let loose one single powerful volley. But that was it. That was their one shot. Before they had any chance to reload, the cavalry was on top of them.
Because you know what happened next? It wasn't a battle. It was a massacre.
And we know just how brutal and efficient this was because we have accounts from the attackers themselves. Listen to this from a private named Weed Marshall. His account is just chilling. He confirms they charged right in that 20-second window and that the whole thing was over in a matter of minutes.
And this is the part that we have to be really clear about. After that first overwhelming charge, the fight was over. And that's when the killing started. This wasn't combat anymore. The sources make it clear this was an execution of men who were wounded, disarmed, or actively trying to surrender.
Private Marshall's account gets even more horrific. He actually wrote that they mutilated the bodies of the fallen Union soldiers, using the men's own bayonets against them. I mean, this wasn't about winning a skirmish. This was about sending a message of pure terror.
And this brutality, it wasn't just for the black soldiers. The white officers leading them got no mercy either. Lieutenant Thaddeus Cox surrendered, and instead of being taken prisoner, he was shot through the mouth. Sergeant James Spencer was stripped of his uniform and killed right there. No one was spared.
So for over 100 years, this whole event, the story, the names of the men who died, it was just gone, lost. But thankfully, recent work by historians is finally bringing them back into the light. I mean, just think about that for a second. For over 150 years, these men who died fighting for freedom were denied even their own names. Their bodies were eventually moved to the Vicksburg National Cemetery, but their headstones were all marked simply unknown. But today, because of some amazing work by historians, we can say their names. We can finally remember Private Anderson Thomas.
We can remember Private Greenberry Johnson.
And we can remember Private Moses Brisk. You see, they weren't just unknown soldiers. They were real men who fought and died for something huge.
And this timeline, wow, it really shows you just how long the story was buried. The massacre happens in '64. Just a few years later, they're made anonymous, and it takes all the way until our lifetime, the 2010s, for researchers to piece it all together and give them back their names and their story.
So why is this one small, brutal event so important? Because Ross's Landing wasn't a one-off thing. It was basically a horrifying preview, a bloody dress rehearsal for even bigger, more infamous massacres of black soldiers at places like Fort Pillow and Poison Spring. It's just a stark, bloody reminder of the supreme price these men paid for freedom.
The story of Ross's Landing was almost erased completely, saved only by a few people digging through old records. And it just makes you wonder, right? How many other stories just like this one are still out there, buried in an archive somewhere, just waiting to be told?